Hey, I am Janocha and I'm going to teach you cats how to operate a camera. Now, the camera I'm using as an example is the Canon T5i, which is part of Canon's Rebel series, which is a very competent brand of DSLR cameras, and this was actually my first camera, and I still dig it, I still use it. It's standard at Wilmington University and at the Newcastle County government. Is that ironic? I don't know. But before we get into the camera or the lenses, just talk about this guy. This is a very cool piece of equipment. It's very capable of a lot. And here's some stuff I shot with it. And here's some photos. As you can see, this is a very capable camera, but firstly, you need to know what you're doing. Now, when operating a camera, you need to keep a few things in mind. Movement. Now, all these things are going to determine what your image conveys, because there's a lot that goes into it. So universally with all cameras, when filming, you need to keep frame rate in mind. Now you can shoot 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 60 frames per second with this. I'm getting carried away. Okay, let's go to part 2. So now we're going to talk about lenses. Now, firstly, there are two kinds of lenses you can operate with. A zoom lens and a prime lens. Now, a prime lens is of a fixed focal length. For example, this is an 85mm lens, and it can only go to 85mm. Now, millimeters are the measurement of a focal length. This is a 24 to 70mm Canon lens. If I'm shooting at 24mm, you're going to see it's a wider shot. Now, if I'm shooting at 70mm, it's going to be a very tight shot. Now, as you can notice, the wider shot, there's a lot more in focus, and the tighter shot, there's a lot less. That's cool because it isolates your subject. The lower the millimeter you're shooting in, the wider the angle. Anyway, with lenses, another thing to keep in mind is aperture. Now, aperture is the eye of the lens. As you can see here, when the aperture is at 22, the eye of the lens is closed. Now, when I open that to 1.5, as you can see, the eye is open. Now, that allows more light to hit the image sensor, meaning you're going to get a brighter image, which is good, but at the same time, you're also decreasing your focal range. It's not always a problem. Now, let's talk about the camera. There are a few settings internally that you should know about. Firstly, shutter speed. Now, the shutter speed determines the speed of the shutter inside the camera. Now, the shutter is a mechanism inside the camera that moves in front of the image sensor, determining the duration in which light is hitting the sensor. Higher the shutter speed, the shorter amount of time light will be hitting your sensor, meaning it's going to darken your image, and the opposite is also true. Now, shutter speed also determines motion blur. For example, I'm shooting at 1/60th of a second, and check out that motion blur. It's quite a little bit, but if I had that shutter speed higher, there'd be less motion blur. You'll be able to see my hand more distinctly as I move about the frame. Now, a couple other things. ISO. ISO is the electronic brightening of an image sensor. The T5i, if you jack it up to 1600 ISO, that's where noise will start being introduced into your image, because when you electronically brighten your sensor too much, it doesn't have all that information in those areas. So it's going to start to pixelate, and that's what we call noise, that fuzziness in an image. The operation of this camera is pretty straightforward. I always keep my T5i on the manual setting, the M setting on this dial up here. The picture mode is when it's simply on. The video mode is all the way to the front. To mount the lens, you take off the cap here, take off the cap here, line up the dots with one another, turn it, can hear it snap, take off the lens cap, and we're just about ready to go. So I'm gonna put my camera on video mode. I'm gonna flip out the LCD screen to face us. The battery's dying. I didn't prepare for this. The camera is at a shutter speed of 60. The aperture is at 3.5 and the ISO is at 800. So look at how good this image is. Oh, it looks pretty good. Very decent. But there you go. That's basic of T5i and cameras. I'm gonna do it again. Hi there.